Yep, good. Yep, good to go. Good. Thanks. Zoe, is the presentation available?
Andrew, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, look, I've got 2 live streams going, so I'm going to have to leave this meeting and go onto Teams for another meeting. So I wish you well.
Thanks. All good.
This didn't work, did it?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee members. This afternoon's workshops on the 135 Roach Street seismic upgrade options. I'm Dustin Mills, and I'm joined by Greg Boyle. Just a continuation of Property Services presentations this afternoon. So included in the 2024-25 Enhanced Annual Plan is the 135 Roach Street seismic upgrades, re-roofing and windows remedials project. In preparation for this, we are undertaking the initial planning phase of the project. Included in this decision is what the optimized strengthening solution for the building is. So the purpose of this presentation is to gain feedback from the committee on potential possible seismic upgrade options for 135 Roach Street, and that's between 50% NBS and 67% NBS. So NBS refers to the new building standards. So a building that's at 50% NBS is a building designed to 50% of the building standards that have been adopted since approximately 2017. So in terms of the project objectives, the first objective is to provide a building at 135 Roach Street that is safe, legally compliant, and fit for use for at least 25 years. And the second is to undertake optimized seismic strengthening determined through balancing the cost and the specific risk characteristics of the building, while considering a number of other factors such as the building age, function, and type. So just in terms of the next slide, just looking at a brief history of the building. So there were 2 stages to the building. The first stage, is shown in blue on the attached slide, was built between 1968 and 1969 and originally formed the Te Awamutu Borough Council Municipal Office. The second stage was built approximately 5 years later, and that formed the Te Awamutu Civic Centre with the library in the middle and the museum on the southwestern side of the building. So just looking a little bit in terms of the current condition, you'll see the condition of the roof. Now that's on that stage 1 building, so that portion of the roof is 55 years old. The other roof on the rest of the building's 5 years newer, but also approaching a condition like that. When you see the stains on the ceiling tiles, that's in the middle portion, so the previous library portion of the building. That's due to both the condition of the roof as well as the design using internal gutters, which we'll see on the subsequent slide. So just looking at the subsequent slide, there's a photo of a similar portion of the roof from September 2021 when we were originally going to undertake the re-roofing and windows project to the current condition. So you can see significant deterioration in the roof since then. In the photo, you'll also be able to see the internal gutters that are present on the building, which is one of the challenges we face with it, that there's a fairly flat roof with internal gutters, so there's not, so that results in the internal gutters being fairly shallow, and if you get any clogging of the rainwater heads, you can get inflow back into the building. The next slide shows the current condition of some of the windows. Staff that were using the windows taped them up because of the condition. They're 50-year-old windows again, with steel windows having a design life of approximately 50 years. So the windows are end of life. Then one of the important considerations is from the museum perspective. So one of the key considerations is undertaking the project during 24-25 is that there are currently significant taonga being installed at 135 Roach Street. As you saw from some of the photos, the roof on the museum side is in slightly better condition, but if the project is significantly delayed further, the items and artifacts that are stored in the museum will eventually become at risk. So that's one of the drivers in terms of this project proceeding forward. So just looking through a bit of the scope of works of the project. So the budget from the enhanced annual plan covers a few activities, both within 135 Roach Street as well as in other council occupied buildings. In terms of the seismic upgrade, so the key structural weakness relates to the wall to roof connection detail, as well as the wall and roof bracing. As such, the proposed seismic strengthening work includes improving the wall plate connection, additional roof bracing, as well as the infill of some of the large full height windows to improve lateral bracing provided by the walls. In addition to that, you've got the roof and the windows, which you see in the photos of. There's also a need to upgrade the current fire safety standards. So the building's got a type 3 system in it at the moment, and we need to upgrade that to a type 4 based on the current standards and occupation within the building. There's also the possibility for the funds to fund a new ducted air conditioner and fresh air system in the museum. Just last week, one of the aircon units in the museum failed, so we had to switch that unit with the area on the mezzanine above so that we could continue to keep the thermal conditions within the museum at the correct levels. But there's also no fresh air system in the museum, which makes controlling the humidity fairly difficult. So while the building's not occupied, this provides the ideal opportunity, particularly with some of the aircon units being towards the end of their life. There's also possible improvements to the museum layout that can be undertaken. So we've been in discussions around potentially removing walls to make the space more usable. And then depending on which of the seismic options we select, there's also the potential remediation of some of the internal fit out. So you'll see later that the 67% is significantly more intrusive than the 50% option. So just providing a bit of a context around life risks and what we need to do to meet our legal requirements. So the legal requirement for a building owner is 34% NBS within the timeframes that have been stipulated. However, the New Zealand Society of Earthquake Engineers recommend 67% as a minimum. However, they provide the following caveats. The underlying aims of the legislation is to cause a reduction in earthquake risk represented by existing buildings. It will be far better to bring a building from, say, 35 to 60% than to do nothing, because achieving 67% involved a quantum jump in expenditure. The approaches and techniques available to improve structural performance in earthquakes gives considerable scope to arrive at a solution that is effective, economical, and not necessarily intrusive to the functions within the buildings. So that's what we're trying to get through this process and through this discussion we're having today. To put some of these risks in context, an earthquake-prone building, which the building currently is estimated at a 1 in 40,000 to a 1 in 100,000 annual fatality risks, whereas driving a car is estimated to carry a fatality risk of 1 in 20,000. So even with the building being earthquake-prone, you still at least twice as at risk driving to work or driving a council vehicle than you are sitting in the building. So that just provides a bit of context on the risk, and obviously that incrementally decreases as you go up in seismic performance. So, so that life risk considerations needs to be balanced against a number of other factors, and they listed on the sheet here. Just as an example, you may have a building that's 20% NBS, that's 6 stories in Wellington with a brick facade, with a number of pedestrians and motorists around the building. And you could have a building like 135 Roach Street, which is a single-story building that's set back from the road, that may have a similar percentage NBS, but there's different specific risk characteristics associated with each of those different scenarios, and that needs to be factored into the overall analysis. If you note item number 7 on the list, it's getting an idea of stakeholder preferences and risk tolerance, and that's the purpose of the workshop today. So, yep. So at the moment, we currently drafting a seismic performance policy that's currently in review with a structural engineer. Once it's been through that review phase, we will distribute it to a number of internal stakeholders, before which we will then present it to the council. But the recommendations within that policy is that a minimum seismic performance of 34% NBS, with a commitment to investigate the option for further strengthening of the building. So in terms of the options that are on the table, as discussed earlier, the 50% NBS option is significantly less intrusive. The solution involves removing the existing sheets and applying bracing above the existing socking on the building, whereas the 67% requires a lot more intrusive work, which we'll discuss later. As a result of this, the 50% NBS option has a 3-month shorter construction period, which would impact on the duration of our lease at 55 Rickett Road. It's also got an approximate 600,000 cheaper construction cost, excluding the potential cost savings on the lease, and that could be used to fund the HVAC in the museum, some upgrades to the layout in the museum, as well as reactive maintenance on end-of-life assets on other council buildings. So, for example, over half of the HVAC units in this building are beyond their original design life at about 15 years. So in terms of the 67% option, it's significantly more intrusive. So as discussed, we'd have to remove the existing ceiling, the HVAC in the ceiling space, all of the services within the ceiling space. There's potential impacts on the walls and the carpets. So it's significantly more intrusive, noting that a lot of that work was only done 5 to 6 years ago. It may require additional funding, so there is some items that we still getting costed, like the fire engineering costs to do that work. So we're anticipating that we would be able to undertake the 50% option within budget, and we are not yet certain whether the 67% option can be undertaken within our available budget. The next consideration is the consideration of precedence. So if we set a limit of, if we try and enforce a level of 67% on this building on 135 Roach Street, we have 101 Bank Street, which is currently at 35% NBS for an IL4 building, or 60% NBS for an IL2 building. So the IL refers to the importance level of the building. And because this building has got an emergency operations center capacity to it, it's measured based on importance level 4. We also have 23 Wilson Street, which has a ISA plus of 34% NBS, and we currently undertaking a detailed seismic assessment, and there's a chance that those results may come back at less than 67%. So there's that consideration of precedence and the impacts of this decision on subsequent building works. So just going through to the closing slide, the proposed seismic strengthening option is 50% NBS, and we will open that up to discussions and feedback on both 50% NBS and 67% NBS. As noted earlier, there's a fairly substantial step change in terms of the solution that the 67% option requires relative to the 50% NBS.
Okay, thank you. What's our legal requirement?
So our legal requirement is 34% and above.
Okay, thank you. Roger.
Yeah, thanks through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it's really an interesting discussion and decision to be made this. As a point of clarification, do you know and can you tell what from central government do they set an established standard for the government buildings that they occupy, either self or by rental? I had thought that they'd set a really high level for government buildings.
Yes, I guess it will vary, and I don't know the absolute answer to that. But
Right.
In a rebuild, some of the earthquake damage that happened post the Kaikoura earthquake a few years ago, there's a lot of rebuild that's taken place in Wellington. Buildings were completely demolished and started again. I would expect that they would pitch their design standard at 67%, as distinct from, in effect, retrofitting the existing building as at Roach Street, which is not damaged in any way.
I'd also heard it may not be accurate, so you can tell me if you know that it's not, but some of the commercial rental spaces that are, say, taken by national companies like Westpac Bank and National Bank, that they set quite a high benchmark of the 67% also.
Yeah. Although we are also hearing that there's a number of councils around that are choosing to go for 34% or above, so setting 34% as a minimum for when they own the buildings. Sometimes it gets a bit different when they're leasing the building as opposed to owning the building. You'll probably also have heard recently that central government's bringing forward a review into earthquake-prone buildings, and some of the feedback we're hearing from the industry is that firstly, there's considerations around single-story buildings, which this building is, and the second consideration is where tenants are demanding or requiring a performance above 34%. So that seems to be some of the feedback that's going to be provided through that review being brought forward.
Monty.
I just got a question about the wider context of this, because under the accommodation strategy, Roche Street was looking surplus to requirements. Under our new plan, it's not. So this is back to bring this up to some level of standard.
Yes.
with a 25-year design life.
Yes.
So can someone from property sort of just give me a sense of the bigger picture here? We're setting this up for 25 years. Is that now what we're imagining, that we're going to be there for 25 years, that the previous accommodation strategy is kind of long-term off?
Do you want to have some comment, Ken?
Yeah, so look, I'll answer that. I mean, I guess with where we got to with the with the long-term plan, etc., and pushing pause on some projects, certainly the accommodation strategy was prepositioned on the fact that we were building Te Arawai, and some other projects potentially happening as well. Things like the Cambridge Library, obviously, which was going to free up office space. In terms of where we got to with the long-term plan and pushing pause on some of those projects, it really put the onus on actually getting the museum up and running as quickly as we could in a cost affordable way. So that's been the driver. That's why this building over the road there has come back into life, because we do need some staff accommodation needs to be met. And there's 2 wings over there that could achieve that, but probably more importantly, and that's why there was a dedicated slide up there just before in regard to the museum. We do need to get that museum up and running again. There is some incredible taonga in that museum, and we want that to be displayed again. This is the quickest way of achieving this, and still having a decent lifetime or a decent time frame involved. If we wouldn't be sinking this kind of money into it if it was only going to be an option for 3 or 4 years. It is an option for it does keep those buildings alive absolutely for a good 25 years. I mean, will the museum be operating out of that building for the next 25 years? I don't know. In fact, to be honest, I'd hope not. I'd hope that we could still achieve the dream of Te Arawai at an appropriate point, and in which case, that building would be freed up for some other purpose. Whether that's further staff accommodation, whether it's rented out, leased out, used for some purpose. It's we pretty much formed the view that in regard to everything that had happened and the push pause on those projects, that this was very much a proposition that made a lot of sense. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. It's a good answer. Thanks.
Just want to ask a question just for my own knowledge. Importance level, we actually have a civil defence function.
Yes.
All right, so we have to comply with that. And in doing that, we need to know whether importance level will be 1 to 5, I see, within that.
Yes.
What would you rate that building at in that respect?
So 135 Road Street's an importance level 2 building based on the occupation and function of the building.
Because as I say, when we have a civil emergency, that would be utilised possibly for staff to actually interact with the control room. There could be a link there. That's why I'm asking that question. So I said, as I say, on civil defence, just ask what would happen there.
So it's not set up as an official emergency operations centre, but you've obviously got a business continuity consideration in terms of needing to get staff operations up and running as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Okay. So getting back to where we're at, going to NPS 34% is not being considered as an option. And what does that mean? Like in terms of at 34, 50, 67, are we talking about scale of earthquakes that they expect to survive or
So in terms of the 34% NBS option, it would be a fairly similar solution to the 50% NBS. There may just be a few less screws or something like that in the existing plywood.
Okay.
So it's effectively what the 50% option is. It's maximizing a certain design solution, and then to get beyond that, you need to take the step change to a more intrusive design solution.
So in other words, you're saying that going to 50% is sensible, doesn't cost a lot more, but we achieve more. Okay.
Yeah, so it would be effectively the same cost as a 34% NBS.
Okay. Mike?
Thanks for the chair. Just off the back of Lou's question about the scale of 1 to 5 of importance of council buildings, that being a 2, and I guess this is probably a 4. Right. So, I don't know, do we go to staff? I mean, it's not us. We're not sitting in the building over there if something goes wrong. Are staff engaged around this at all? I mean, obviously there's opportunity cost of a spend and things, but ultimately this is a pretty formidable health and safety risk. That's why we're all sort of looking at it. I know it's not a governance thing and it's not a, but I'm putting my social conscience head on here because I'm a teacher. So I would, there'd be conversations with some other people apart from just us around people who work in the building.
Yeah, so look, this has been tested to a reasonable degree. I understand with the staff that currently occupy Rickett Road. In fact, formerly occupied that building. Obviously temporarily displaced and put into Rickett Road. Look, my understanding, my very good understanding, is that they are keen as mustard to be back into this building and quite comfortable with the the proposition at the 50%.
Right.
So so that has been tested and that is fine by them.
That's great to hear. And also I liked how you talked about a 5-story building is not a 1-story building. A building over a footpath is not a building back from a footpath. So that resonates with me. This 50% thing, if staff are comfortable, I'm more than comfortable with it. I think it's a good way forward.
Bruce?
My question relates to the two standards. If we went to the highest standard, would all the artefacts of the museum have to be moved out as compared with if we stick it at 50? Can they stay there and you can still work with them being in the building? Or does it have to be a clean out both systems?
Probably for both options, we'll move the taonga that's currently stored on the top floor down into the basement of the museum just as a precaution. But in terms of so what the 50% option also does, which I didn't include the slides, is the works above the existing roof. So there's an opportunity for us to get the roof drainage to the outside of the building. So a lot of that damage as a result of leaks from the internal gutters, we potentially get rid of that. So just from a long-term protection of artifacts and taonga, it provides a more sensible solution from a roof drainage perspective. And in a museum, we shouldn't be having internal gutters with the low-pitched roof that we currently have.
Yeah. So look, I think the other thing that is of relevance to Bruce's question is that, the 50% thing is a whole lot less invasive than the 67% solution, isn't it? So we may well have to shift that precious taonga out of the museum wing for a period of time while that's been done. That probably would be a prudent thing to do. But look, far less invasive in terms of things like carpets and walls, etc., internal wall coverings, than what that 67% method is, simply because we kind of leave the ceiling intact, and as Dustin has just said, we build over the top of it.
Roger?
Yeah, I think on consideration, I feel comfortable with the 50%, given that it's a single-story building, because as we know, with multiple stories, the risk of damage and hurt increases. So it's a single-story building, so I think I'd feel comfortable with the 50, to be honest.
That undermines the basis of the policy that we're developing. So we're looking at each building on a horses for courses basis, not just necessarily saying one size fits all. So as you've touched on, and as Dustin explained earlier, the height of the building, obviously in a high intensity area, town centre deserves a different approach from 135 Roach Street for all the reasons we've mentioned. And yeah.
Monty?
Ultimately, this group does own risk in this organisation, so I think it's really good that this is here. I'm really comfortable. I think you've come up with a really sensible solution. 50% sounds good, so I'm happy.
Yep, likewise. Liz? Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
So through the chair, if I can just say, so we can't make a decision today in this forum, and this was just making sure that this issue or this this matter was you were well over it and you had good knowledge of it to make a sound decision. So the intention is that this comes to council, I believe, in 2 weeks' time, for a formal resolution on the basis that that we've had this good discussion today, and this discussion has been in an open to the public environment. Has been live streamed. So so you've had the discussion and you'll go on and make the decision from here.
Yeah, we'll change our mind in a fortnight. But that's fine. Okay. All right, thanks, guys. No, that's great. Yeah, awesome.
So Piranha replant, David,
Yeah.
waiting in the wings.
Oh, right. Kia ora, Mr Chairperson and members of the committee. So this is a workshop around the Pirongia Forest Sainsbury Road replant. It was the 40 hectares that was harvested towards the beginning of the year, completing in July. So the workshop looks at the planted area. The purpose of it is to provide elected members with information regarding that replant and the opportunities for the planting selection. So this just indicates the plot sizes, which you were probably aware of in previous reports, coming through to it's just over 40, but there were some species that were not accessible. So there is a little bit of other exotics left after that 40 hectares of plantation. We have met with a eco-vitalist, Indigenous vegetation consultant, theoretically a guy that looks at natives, and the proposal of planting high MGO, which is formerly known as UMF Manuka, Leptospermum, was tabled. And one of the points of discussion was an expected return versus Manuka high MGO versus a radiata over the term of the life of a radiata plantation. So looking at the honey industry pre-COVID and post-COVID. Pre-COVID, there was an estimated 1 million hives in New Zealand, and a lot of that harvested MGO Manuka. And then post-COVID, there's an estimated 500,000. So we've lost 50% of our asset as far as honey industry. Now, the reason for being that is that most of that honey went through to China and for the health benefits that it does provide. And China closed its border to those imports. Going forward, we've looked at 3 different options, and we've asked for 3 different quotes. So in the current budget, we have $296,000 for the replant program. First company provided us, they were asked to provide us with replantation of their selected strain. One provided a Radiata FG seedling, the other one provided a GF Plus. The difference being is the GF Plus has an elongated branching process, so therefore it's less maintenance in the background. And the other one recommended a high MGF Manuka strain from Kawhia. Now, the reason why it is from Kawhia is that when you are planting natives in your rohi, it is requested that plants come from that rohi. So this is a strain that was developed, that was taken, tested in Kawhia, and is harvested in Kawhia. And the strain that the company 3 is providing is actually the offspring, and at present it is producing higher MGO than the original one. So the market return, so with the market return, at present there's a glut of high UMF, MGO factor honey at the moment due to that border being closed. With the maturity of honey, it crystallizes, so they have to sell it fast. They're expecting that glut will be gone on in 2 years' time. So when we're looking at return, you can have a low return, which is based on a 30% lease model. So that the production of the honey is the lease model is 30% of that production. And then if a low return, it drops right back down. So an example of that is that a 5 hectare site will produce $15,000 worth of honey, and in a lease agreement will be 30% of that, therefore giving 5,000 per 5 acres. So if we look at our 40 hectares, the figures are up there on the slide that show on a low return, we're 485,000 over the 25-year period, and then if it's a good return, we're $2.4 million. And then based on the return that we had from the radiator harvest, we're $1 million. Now we have talked to a local Te Awamutu company, is now a leading global Manuka honey brand, and they have approached us for a lease on the site, showing high interest in the Manuka due to the fact of its north-facing capability and its protection. Plus, they have also looked at us for an overwintering site. So within the honey industry, the bees are stressed pretty much through either kiwi fruit, stone fruit, whatever. They're a single source of pollen, and while the bees go hard to produce the honey that you want, it is also detrimental to the brood. So they look to overwinter for an 8-month period, 7 to 8 months period, and they're looking for a multi-flora environment. So the environment that Pirongia provides is grazing as well as a multitude of natives up there. So staff have looked through this proposal with 3 lenses. It's best revenue return to the ratepayer, best approach for the environment, and best approach for the user. And the user in the forest is a Pirongia Mountain Bike Club that has legal tenure via way of lease of that parcel of land. We've received feedback. We've shared this with Pirongia Mountain Bike Club due to their legal tenure, and the feedback has been in support of this proposal to go with Manuka. Further consultation will be done with stakeholders, but the feedback that we have had from the stakeholders, preferably to go to a native. And Manuka being a primary crop in the native strain, it does allow other natives to come through, which the gully systems will turn back to full native, primary, secondary and tertiary. Tertiary being your big guys, your remus and totras and kakateas. So this is to let you know that we're recommending with replanting the forest with a high MGO Manuka strain from Kawhia, and we'll consult and to inform with the relevant stakeholders going forward.
And David, another advantage with the Manuka is we get an income stream rather than a lump sum at the end with a pine. I mean, that's just a bonus for me because there's no question about which way I think we should go. So, but yeah, comments, Claire.
Yeah, thanks, David. It's great to see this, and yeah, I'm pretty supportive of it. Yeah, I love the fact that natives stack up really well, because I know that the community has said repeatedly that they didn't want pines back. Yeah, so that's good. I was going to ask whether or not the lease, you said it's 30% each year. Is that based on actual return, or it is? So if they do better, we do get more. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah. And I am pleased to hear that you're also looking at multi-flora solutions, you know, like it's, because I've heard that bees like to have a variety, yeah, and you've said that can be achieved, yeah. So that sounds really great, actually. Thanks.
So through the chair, typically the Manuka honey, they chase the flower. So that's why you'll see a lot of them going Northland, and then they come down, they end up on Ruapehu. After that, then they like to build the brood back up, and that's when they look for a multi-flora environment. So the bee then has the capacity to go out and get all the different properties from the pollen and nectar.
Mike?
Through the chair, is there any other business models we've looked at rather than the 30% model and partnering with, yeah, we looked at other models.
Yeah, it's a through the chair. It's a fairly comprehensive industry, and there is a load of high risk depending on weather, as far as failure of hive, how good the queens are. So it's not really in our expertise to look at running that business ourselves. Hence why we're looking to go with a proven market provider.
So did I. Really was. Suggested we don't go in there.
I'm happy with the recommendation.
Yeah, me too. Well, I mean, again, it's a workshop, but yeah. No,
Mike, I've got a business model for you. I give my guys 222 hectares and I get 2 boxes of honey a year. I just realised I'm being ripped off. That sounds good to me.
yeah, no, awesome. Thanks, David.